Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the collection for the 1993 crossover event story, Spider-Man Maximum Carnage. This story collected across 14 issues of every Spider-Man comic that was running at the time, which included Amazing, Spectacular, Web of, Spider-Man with no adjectives, and the brand new Unlimited Spider-Man, probably created just for this adventure, was probably an inevitable outcome of the 90s, especially considering the rising popularity of Venom and Carnage. I spent the last two Spider-Man months, which is each September on the channel, covering all the previous appearances of Venom. From Spider-Man finding the black suit during Secret Wars, to him learning it was an alien intelligence, to him ripping off the costume in a church where it then found and attached to Eddie Brock. Since Peter had been wearing the suit, it knew everything about him, so for the first time in his career, Spider-Man had a villain that knew his secret identity, had all of his powers, was stronger, could hide from his spider sense, and was a dangerous psychopath to boot. It was a unique, terrifying, and especially dangerous villain to have, so perhaps it's not really surprising that he hit a special chord with fans and they wanted to see more and more of him. A response Marvel was more than happy to give because it was selling comics. The only problem was, it very quickly became problematic to have a character who was clearly able to defeat Spider-Man at any moment continue to lose to Spider-Man. So to keep the character around, they invented a sense of justice in him. Venom came to view himself as the protector of the innocent, only wanting to punish those he saw as guilty. Well, it might be more accurate to say that this was always kind of part of his character, but Marvel would really start to push it more and more over time, to the point that he'd eventually get his own series where he was the hero. So to fill fans' need for a symbiote villain, along came Carnage. Carnage was a spawn of Venom, so he wouldn't know Spider-Man's secret identity, and bonded to serial killer Cletus Cassidy, creating a new, more deadly symbiote that immediately went on a killing spree and forced Spider-Man and Venom to work together to protect the innocent. Once Carnage was stopped, Spider-Man and Venom would come to agree to go their separate ways, with Venom moving out west to San Francisco. That was essentially supposed to be the end of it, especially since they were saying the Carnage symbiote had been killed at the end of his story, but of course it was far from over. It would only be a matter of time before Carnage came back bigger and badder than ever. While largely probably overshadowed by the almost simultaneous death of Superman, this comic would still gain enough attention and notoriety to have lasting effects through today, including inspiring the second Venom movie, getting constant references in other symbiote stories, getting its own toy line, and its own video game, which was absolutely one of my favorite games growing up. Seriously, that game kicked ass and the soundtrack absolutely rocked. But I guess I'm not here to talk about that yet. I'm here to talk about the story that inspired it, so let's light this city on fire and take this away. The comic opens on Cletus Cassidy being wheeled on a... I don't know, is that a gurney? I don't know what a gurney is exactly. Through Ravencroft. Ravencroft is very much the Marvel equivalent to Arkham Asylum, and both it and the supervillain prison known as The Vault are pretty major parts of 90s Spider-Man stories. Ravencroft is also the setting for the opening of the upcoming Clone Saga. Cletus, the whack-job yokel, is being wheeled around so he can be studied by some scientists because of course science is to blame. For everything, obviously. The head scientist here has detected some anomaly in Cassidy's blood that she thinks might be the key to him being a murderous serial killer. An anomaly, you say? Hopefully it's not filled with some weird alien that considers its duty to be killing everybody for the good of the universe somehow. Oh, that would be silly. That couldn't possibly happen in two stories I covered this Oh, that's exactly what it is? Well, shit. Yeah, the story they're going with is that in Cassidy's previous fight with Venom and Spider-Man, the Carnage symbiote entered into his blood through some open wounds and grew and mutated inside of him. So now Cassidy is Carnage instead of being sort of two beings working in tandem like Eddie and the Venom symbiote. Kind of explains why Carnage doesn't use we like Venom does. Or it's because Venom's just obsessed with pronouns like the obviously woke snowflake that he is. So symbiote charged again, Carnage breaks free, kills his guards, kills the scientist, and then proceeds to rampage through Ravencroft, increasing his body count drastically. I gotta say, I know it's bloodless, but I'm surprised by how definite they were willing to make it that Carnage was actually killing people in this series. He has a discernible kill count with actual corpses shown. That seems pretty pushing the limits for a 1993 mainstream comic. One of the inmates at Ravencroft starts cheering him on, and we meet for the first time the woman named Shriek. Carnage decides he likes her Kiss cosplay and takes her with him to go Spidey hunting, but when they think they've found him, they instead only run across his evil doppelganger. These doppelgangers first appeared in Infinity War, the original comic one that I already covered on the channel, not the movie. And Spider-Man's was shown to have died, but a creature called the Demogoblin revived him. Demogoblin is a little complicated. The villain Hobgoblin asked for extra power to defeat Spider-Man and got it in the form of demonic possession. Eventually he would decide that wasn't for him and eject the evil half, and that somehow created Demogoblin. I point that out only because he'll be in this story a lot too. Anyway, Shriek takes to Doppelganger instantly, stopping Carnage from killing him and adopting him as the first of their children, quote unquote, in their twisted family. Carnage leaves the two to run off to the Daily Bugle to frighten J. Jonah Jameson into publishing an article for Venom to see, in order to bring him back to New York. By this point, Spidey has finally heard of Carnage's escape and gone out looking for him, despite having just promised Mary Jane that he would take a break from being Spider-Man for a while. Yeah, we all knew that wasn't gonna happen. This dilemma is part of the fallout of the death of Harry Osborn, the second Green Goblin and Peter's best bud from college. Though, like pretty much everyone else Peter met at school, Harry was more of a bully to Peter at first. In his last moments, Harry recovered some sanity and died heroically in Spectacular Spider-Man issue 200. And since the first issue of Spectacular included in this story arc is number 201, you can see that the wounds for Peter are very fresh. We even first see Peter in this story at Harry's funeral. Instead of running into Carnage, Spidey comes across Shriek and Doppel, as Shriek will affectionately call him, and so will I. The doppelganger is faster, stronger, has 6 arms, and his webbing is razor-edged. Somehow. Not sure how that works, but it does. And now he also has Shriek coaching him to make things even worse for Spidey. The fight only ends when Spidey ignores Doppel to go after Shriek, who by this point has revealed she has Soundwave Energy Blast. I imagine they shriek very loud, hence the name. She does have another power, but we'll discuss that later because it doesn't include being super sturdy, so Spider-Man knocks her out with a finger flick. Doppel then kicks Spidey off the roof in retaliation. Splat? Splat, you say? Oh man, a splat is never good. It seems our little doppelganger has also taken some to Shriek, and so he books it out of there with her unconscious body. Spidey can't follow because the attack and fall broke his ribs. These broken ribs will then plague Spidey for basically the rest of this story. But I'm not gonna mention it every time it comes up in the comic because that would just get ridiculous. Cloak and Dagger show up to rescue Spidey from some street level goons and take him to their hideout, the Holy Ghost Church, only for Doppel and Shriek to get a second wind and follow them there, with Carnage joining them soon after. Shriek kills Dagger in an explosion of light, and for some reason this causes the bad guys to flee. I guess cause if they push their advantage now, this couldn't be a 14-parter. Devastated over Dagger's death, Cloak simply vanishes, and Spider-Man goes home to lick his wounds. Carnage and his gang head to Central Park to continue their murder spree, but by now Carnage's plot has worked and Venom has reached New York to bring an end to his foul offspring. We don't actually see this fight happen though, and instead jump to Venom arriving at Spider-Man's home, which we're also not told how he knew where it was, looking like he just barely escaped with his life. And I'm trying not to gush over how much I love Mark Bagley's art at every single opportunity, but I do very much love this panel. I love how MJ's underwear is so fluffy and white that it looks like it was made out of extra quilted toilet paper. And I especially love these weird ass bear claw things on Peter's feet. What the hell is up with those slippers? they do look warm and comfy. But when we change issues, both he and MJ are in completely different outfits, with MJ dressed to go out and she immediately does, unwilling to house Venom for even a minute no matter how injured he is. Her reaction may seem a bit extreme for those of us who have grown used to the idea of Venom being an anti-hero, but if you recall, Venom's first appearance involved him showing up to MJ while she was home alone and doing unspecified things to her for an unspecified amount of time. I don't like the implications of that. All we know is it left her a total wreck when Peter found her again. So she is not among the group that is cool with trying to redeem the character. Venom recovers on the Parker's couch without even being invited and confuses Pete with his pronoun use like Pete is Tucker Carlson, before Pete leaves to recruit some extra help in the form of Black Cat. But while Spidey now has new allies in the form of two villains turned anti-heroes in Venom and Black Cat, and one hero turned anti-hero in the now murderously enraged Cloak, Carnage has also been growing his numbers by bringing Demogoblin into the fold. So when the two teams run across each other again at an abandoned warehouse, the vaguely more heroic team gets beat up as the building gets set on fire. Cloak disappears again and Spider-Man escapes, but Venom is weakened by the heat due to the symbiote's weakness to fire, and Black Cat gets trapped under fallen rubble. So instead of keeping track of Carnage and his gang, Spidey opts to make sure his allies are okay, but they're surprisingly ungrateful for his assistance. In their eyes, the danger Carnage presents needs to be met with equal fervor. So for Black Cat and Venom, in order to stop the bad guys, Spidey needs to sink to Carnage's level and be willing to do anything at any cost to stop Carnage. Or as Black Cat puts it, sometimes you have to stroke the devil to save the righteous. What? I'm not sure that means what you seem to think it means, Cat. Distraught, Pete heads to Aunt May's house like he's still a teen in need of consolation so she can assure him that he'll find the right answer in his heart. And as much as I love Mark Bagley's art, I very much realized reading through this again that it was probably Spectacular Spider-Man that I read the most growing up. And I think Sal Buscema's art might have most shaped my concept of what Peter Parker and his surrounding cast are supposed to look like. Which isn't too surprising considering Buscema worked on something like 100 issues of this series. And that experience comes into play here in probably my favorite sequence of the whole series, as Peter's dad counters Aunt May's positive outlook on life with a bleaker, more cynical outlook of his own, interspersed with images of the mayhem Carnage and his gang are right then causing in downtown NYC. The entire crossover could have probably been just this issue. It's so good. So many themes on display here, like Peter's wholesome family life in suburban Queens, contrasted with the twisted family Carnage has built for himself with him as Papa, Shriek as Mom, and Demo and Doppelganger as the kids in the metropolitan downtown. Or the contrast of classic Spidey character Aunt May and her quaint view of the world with essentially newcomer character Richard Parker and his whole fight fire with fire mantra. Or the inner turmoil raging inside Pete as he struggles to figure out who is making the right argument here. This relatively middle of the story issue is standing on a precipice between the past and future of Spider-Man comics, asking the reader, where shall we go? And that's a question it's gonna try to answer. Also of note is that Richard's lack of faith in his fellow humanity, he says, comes from the years he spent locked up in a Soviet prison for being a spy. Of course, we'll learn eventually that this backstory isn't true, something that could have completely ruined this moment. But the truth, that I won't completely spoil here beyond saying that he's essentially a stand-in for a villain, actually kind of makes this speech even a little bit more meaningful. This bit, this moralizing conundrum, is what this comic is actually all about. But I think most people overlook that completely and just see lots of cool fights and wanton murder. Seriously, these two guys are clearly dead. Carnage's kill count must be crazy at this point. Maybe I should have just done this review as a kill count. Most of you probably would have liked that more than me waxing on about morals. But too bad! Sometimes you gotta stroke the devil to save the righteous. Am I using that right? I feel so dirty every time I say that. So Spidey leaves the Parker home more confused than ever, but things only get worse with the regular people of the city now full on rioting. And when those people attack Spider-Man while he's attempting to help somebody hurt in the riot, he lashes out in anger, ready to accept his father's bleak outlook and embrace the darkness. This only amps up further as Venom, Cloak, and Black Cat, now joined by Morbius the Living Vampire, clash with Carnage and his group at a local nightclub called The Deep, because it's currently happening. Or swinging. Or whatever you said in 1993, I don't know. But like, why? Carnage has literally been sweeping through the city in an endless murder spree for like 6 issues by this point. There's open rioting and looting, and nobody's been like, hey, maybe we should shut the city down and keep everybody inside? What is this, a pandemic response? Mary Jane, still angry at Peter, has fallen back on her classic ways and decided to party the night away, and just so happened to do that at the Deep. Of course. So she's caught in the middle of this big brawl along with a bunch of other Roxbury types, and Spider-Man has to do damage control to rescue civilians during this fight that leads to yet another building burning and falling down. Now more convinced than ever that Carnage's rampage needs to be stopped, Spidey agrees to work with these questionable companions within their rules. And they have their first meeting of the minds, and holy crap, this is what I'm talking about with how great Mark Bagley's art is. Check out how cool this full-page spread is. Okay, sure, I'll give you that Cloak should probably be on fire here, but, you know, it's a magical cloak. What do you want from me? The squad decides they need more help to stop Carnage, so Cloak blips out to go find Spider-Man's amazing friend Firestar, and Venom and Spidey head to the Baxter Building to still Reed Richards' sonic gun that was so useful against Venom in the past. The Baxter Building is pretty accessible now that the top of the building was blown off during Infinity War. I'm trying to tell you, I did a video on it and you can watch it. In the meantime, Carnage's troop grows even larger with the addition of Carrion. Carrion was originally a distorted clone of Miles Warren, the Empire State University professor who was disturbingly obsessed with Gwen Stacy and blamed Spider-Man for her death. His cloning technology would be the catalyst for both clone sagas, but also lead to creating the current Carrion, who was a fellow student at ESU with Peter, but got exposed to an old experiment of Warren's and it turned him into a supervillain. Like you do, with powers that immediately decay organic matter whenever he touches it. With the sonic gun and Firestar on their side, the team uses Carnage's own tactic against him and have Jameson publish a message for Carnage to meet them at his old orphanage. There, the heroes get their first real win of the arc, finally getting the better of the more minor bad guys and using the sonic gun combined with Firestar to flat out kill Carnage's symbiote. Sweet, job done. Venom closes in for the kill, but Spider-Man still isn't quite ready to go that far and pulls him away. So Shriek slashes Carnage's face with her fingernails, which those must be some nails, and another new version of the Carnage symbiote comes out of Cassidy's blood, finally revealing to the heroes that Carnage is now basically unkillable. Things only get worse as Shriek finally explains her powers. That other one she has that I was talking about. So let's talk about her for a second, since I haven't really done that yet. According to research Morbius does, Shriek's real name is Sandra Deal, although that will get changed in the future. She was an unstable person with a drug habit that made her more unstable, and then she ran across Cloak and got pulled inside the dark dimension that he contains inside his robes, and whatever she saw in there unhinged her even more. It also seemed to unlock her latent mutant powers, which are the screeching energy blasts that she can fire. But now we learn that her powers don't end there. She also has the power to move you. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean to negatively affect people's emotions. She does it all the time without even trying, but she can also focus the power in order to get more of a reaction out of people. Doing so now lets her get a nearby mob, because again, full open city here, to come and attack our heroes. And she does this while explaining all of these things out loud, because that's how you explain things in 90s comics. No time for subtlety, and you can't really build on ideas bit by bit because readers might never get the chance to read the other comics that clarify things. But at least they hang a lantern on it, I guess. A little nudge nudge wink wink, comic readers get it. So everything turns around at this point, with the bad guys gaining the advantage in the fight. Venom turns against Spidey completely and sends him flying into the distance, and then tries to attack Carnage head on, only to be slowed by the sonic effects of Shriek's energy blasts. Instead of killing him straight away though, Carnage decides Venom deserves worse than a quick death, so he takes him and holds him inside the Statue of Liberty, where he spends most of the rest of the comic torturing Venom. Literally torturing him. It's pretty messed up. It's really super messed up when it gets to the point that Venom starts begging for Carnage to stop. I mean, they held back so many things like, blood, because they're worried that kids are going to read this, but they have full-on torture? That's, alright. It does turn out, though, that this was a ruse to get Carnage to try and fire the sonic gun at Venom again, because a piece of Venom had slithered off to sabotage the gun at some unseen moment earlier, which gives Venom the distraction he needs to break free and get away. But back to where we left our heroes, Dawn finally comes up for them in the form of Captain America showing up. We were told earlier that all the Avengers in the Fantastic Four were out of town for some unspecified reason. I guess they're all at some superhero conference on some moon somewhere, and Spidey's invitation must have been lost in the mail. Darn the luck. Cap apparently heard something about what was happening to the Big Apple in his absence, and he alone came back to help end the insanity. It may seem like stretching incredulity to the breaking point that no other Avengers felt the need to help out, but it's actually important to the theme of this story that it's only Cap that shows up. Remember that whole conflict between Richard Parker representing modern views of the darkness in humanity, and May's views representing the golden old days of right and wrong. And here we have the character who literally comes from those golden old days, who represents an idyllic past and stands at the turning point in the story. So Spidey and Firestar rally behind Cap, joined soon by Deathlock and Iron Fist, who have become involved in these events as well, and go to face down Shriek once more, who is out with her quote-unquote children causing general chaos while Papa Carnage is busy with torture. The mere presence of the heroes seems to calm the rioting, but Shriek pushes her powers to their limits and reignites the rage of the regular people, forcing them back into attacking the heroes. Carnage also shows up following Venom having escaped, and annoyed at his family for trying to live up to his name without him, he seems to kill Doppelganger, though I'm sure he'll be fine again eventually. The heroes then get another saving grace in the form of the reformed dagger. There's some weird explanation about how she was turned into pure energy by Shriek's attack and was absorbed into Cloak's dark dimension, and he was able to pull her back into herself. It's not really that important. She then uses the healing power of her light to try and heal Shriek's mind, and seems to almost succeed, but in the end Shriek strikes back and Dagger falls over, exhausted from the exertion. I mean, we can't have a lady save the day, that would be ridiculous. And so all the heroes except Spidey run off, but Spidey was just planning on distracting the bad guys while everyone quickly built a machine that they'll call the Alpha Magna Illuminizer. That's the best you've got? You didn't even try. You couldn't have at least even asked like a high school science class to come up with some actual real words? Pathetic. The point of this machine is to finish what Dagger started, overwhelming Shriek with good vibes. Demogoblin, sensing things going bad, tries to flee, but Spidey webs him and smashes him face first into the pavement. The good vibes energy just explodes, I guess, knocking Shriek out, returning McBride to his normal human self somehow, and killing Carnage? That seems a little easy for how much has happened, but I guess that's what we're going with. So most of the heroes take the defeated villains away, and Spidey enjoys a much-deserved sunset at a lake in the park. A still injured Venom rages at him for stealing his kill, but don't worry Venom, Carnage is still alive. Dun dun dun! He faked his death by putting some of his symbiote on a corpse, and somehow nobody noticed or bothered to verify, even though they all know what Cassidy looks like. But Carnage has also been driven to a new kind of insanity by the alpha manga whatever that has given him back some of the empathy he naturally lacks in leaving him haunted by his ghost. Venom takes advantage of this, chasing Carnage across town to a cemetery and nearly killing him, but Spider-Man jumps in to stop him, giving Venom a speech about how Cassidy can't really be held responsible for his terrible actions, and that adding one more death to all the needless killing that's already happened doesn't really solve anything. But this interruption gives Carnage a chance to recover, and instead of thanking Spidey for saving his life, he attacks the webhead, prompting Venom to drive both himself and Carnage into a conveniently nearby set of generators that explode on impact. Like generators always do. That's well-known facts about generators. But it seems Spidey's words got through to Venom after all, because Carnage is still alive, albeit barely, and Venom hops onto the back of a truck headed out of town, deciding to let Spider-Man finish things his way. So Spider-Man hands the real Carnage off to the Avengers, who have finally returned home, and walks off into the sunset talking about how some monsters stay dead, while Norman and Harry Osborn's gravestones hold up the panel walls. Which is hilarious because Norman is absolutely about to return to life, but we're not talking about that now. Right now, we're talking about the breakdown. As I mentioned in the intro, this comic is very much a comic of the 90s. Everything about it is just so 90s. Skipping the obvious stuff like dialogue, cute technology, and references, this comic could only exist due to the 90s love of the symbiotes. There's also the drastic increase at the time of the growth of anti-heroes like Spawn, Punisher, or Spidey's own Venom, and the comic even features the brief appearance of Nightwatch, a character that first appeared in Spider-Man comics and was just 100% clearly Marvel trying to cash in on Spawn's popularity. There's also that early 90s conservative attitude of lamenting the loss of the golden years of the past when everything was just so simple. Yeah, everything was so simple because the good guys were straight white males and the bad guys were literally everyone else. That's not really a good thing to aspire to. And honestly, all these things do kind of hurt this comic. But they're also what's kinda great about it? I mean, other than the fantastic art. Seriously, it's very 90s looking, but I don't feel there's a single creative team here that doesn't pull their fair share of the load. But while it is a shame how muddled the message is in this lament for a non-existent better days, I greatly appreciate what they're trying to say. And that's that the lethal superheroes that had become so prevalent by this time, they aren't the good guys. They might be enjoyable, they might be entertaining, and sometimes it might be satisfying for them to actually take out the bad guys, but they still aren't the heroes. It's important to note that things don't turn around in this story just because the good old days, represented by Captain America, make an appearance. They turn around because Spider-Man chooses to believe and hope in the goodness inside of people instead of embracing the violence, which only continued to lead to more carnage and destruction. In the end, good won by being good, and this story really helps solidify for Peter Parker that this is the whole point of Spider-Man. To be the one to always try to do good no matter what everyone else is doing. And whatever changes they've made to Spider-Man over the years, this is about the only thing that has remained fairly consistent for the character. And maybe we have this story partly to thank for that. So I'm giving this series a recommendation level of very high. That may seem a little generous, but even in the mass of similar Darkest Night type stories plaguing superhero comics of the 90s, I feel this comic stands out, and honestly, I just think it's a good comic. The collected edition gets 1 Weird Fuzzy Slipper, which is an okay thing, I guess? Because what is it? Is it a bear paw? A killer sloth foot? I don't know. Anyway, the collection contains all 14 issues of the story with a foreword and afterword by writer J.M. DeMatteis, who was the writer on Amazing at the time, but the collection contains no other special features whatsoever. So it's like the bare minimum of a good collection. Fuzzy bear paw minimum slipper thing. I'll stop, I'm sorry. Thanks everybody for watching. I might have a special video next week if I can find the time for it, and then I think I'll be covering an additional Spider-Man comic before moving on to some spooky stuff for October. So if you enjoyed this video, or you're interested in what I'll be covering next, or you're just one of Spidey's good people, then be sure to click that like and subscribe so you can be sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here, in the Comic Cave.